everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the last panel of the World Green Economy Summit 2024, and we kept the best for last. But before we start this panel, I would like to start with asking you, especially that I can see a lot of ladies here. I think this question is going to interest you. So, by show of hands, how many of you is willing to buy a more expensive product that is marketed as being sustainable or environment friendly, which means that it's going to be a little bit more expensive than a traditional product? So how many of you are willing to do that? Not many. So we have, I think, 5 or 6 here only in the room. That is interesting. And that is actually the main topic of this panel. It's this equation or competition between having a sustainable product and an affordable product, and how do consumers react to each. And we have the best people in the industry to answer these questions. I would like, first of all, to introduce our speakers. So we have Mr. Youssef Chehade, co-founder and managing partner at Ecyclex International Recycling. We have Ms. Florence Bulté, Chief Sustainability, Chalhoub Group, and we have Ms. Maryam Al Mansoori, Founder and General Manager, Rebound Plastics. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to start with you, Florence. And it seems like not many people are willing to buy a product that is environment friendly if it has a premium, a price premium. Is it a competition today between sustainability and affordability? Is it an equation that we have to get just right to actually provide an incentive to consumers to accept it?
Absolutely, and it doesn't have to be more expensive. So as a retailer and distributor, but also as brands, there's a lot of R&D and research to make sure that we can come up with a sustainability products which are also affordable, because it shouldn't be a choice between paying more or having a sustainable product. So we have, and I think we will discuss it later in the panel, but there are other solutions as well that as a retailer or distributor we can also bring to the market, like circularity, re-commerce, rental, repair, recycle. So there are some other options, because ultimately the customers shouldn't have to choose between the quality of a product and its sustainable aspect.
Okay, I would like to hear your thoughts, Youssef, as well.
I come from the end of the chain, which is recycling. What happens with a product when it reaches end of its cycle. And as Florence mentioned, we always need to prioritize things before that, like reducing, reusing, reselling, remarketing, to expand the lifespan of a certain product. But when it reaches the dead end, or the end of life, as we call it, especially in the consumer market, where a consumer or a person only has one product to recycle every now and then, or a few products, still there is a cost involved in the logistics of collecting. And the expectation in this region still is that why pay for taking back a product for recycling purposes? So it is a challenge that needs to be solved. But with the willingness of brands also to be more sustainable, we've seen a change in which brands are partnering with us to actually subsidize or support the recycling or the circularity of their products, and taking the burden off the shoulders of the regular consumer and helping in the circularity. So that's one trend we have been noticing. But eventually, on the larger scheme of things, there are other schemes that might be introduced in which it supports the recycling industry. Things as what we have in Europe, for example, like the extended producer responsibility, EPR schemes, and so forth, that support the end of the chain. But in terms of also the willingness of people to spend on sustainability for recycling, it's also improving, especially that with digital recycling apps and so forth, because people these days are very used to paying subscriptions for food delivery apps or other types of apps. So we have been working on these models to digitally provide these services with a small subscription fee. And we are seeing it more and more adopted in the market.
So let me ask you, Maryam, it's about this topic, of course, but I want to ask you about what Youssef and Florence were saying, that sustainability can be affordable. To what extent do you think that there is a certain strategy here to adopt when it comes to making this work?
I think humans need to realize that being sustainable or taking care of where your waste goes is not a privilege or it's not a good thing to do. It's a must do. It's a habit. It's, you know, I recycle not because I'm waiting for an app to give me 2 dirhams cash back. I recycle because I don't want materials polluting the planet, which will impact level of air, health, quality metrics, and economics in general. People need to really let go of, I won't pay more or I won't give back unless I take something in return, because it's very clear that our planet is suffering and waste has a huge role in this.
Thank you so much, Maryam. Florence, let me get back to you and your experience with Chalhoub Group. And now we oftentimes hear the word pre-loved goods. And I think that this is part of the strategy, the overall strategy of sustainability, because it actually extends the life cycle of clothing items and items that we use every day. To what extent are you seeing increased interest in pre-loved items, and especially in the MENA region and the GCC, of course?
Yeah, actually, that's a subject that we researched, and we issued a report end of last year, circularity in the GCC for the fashion industry. So what we can say is that in the GCC, the re-commerce market is only 3% of the global share of the re-commerce globally. So it's still a very small share. It's estimated that between $3.5 and $4 billion in 2022, and it's estimated to grow to $11 billion by 2026, so quite a steady growth. When it comes to specifically the luxury market, the re-commerce was estimated in 2022 at $480 million and also expected to grow to $780 million. So 10 to 15% growth year on year, which is quite steady. So how is it divided specifically in the GCC? Again, for luxury products. 49% is re-commerce of watches. So we can see a huge appetite for pre-loved collector's item. Then it's handbags, jewelry, apparel, and footwear. But again, for luxury market, the re-commerce share is 5% of the total luxury re-commerce share. So again, in the GCC, I would say it's a very nascent way of spending, on products, but we expect a very steady growth, which will be driven by the younger generation, and as you were saying, Maryam, a shift in customer behavior linked to education, awareness, but also pushed by brands, retailers, and distributors, and more offering. Good enough to have a customer shift, but we also need to have offers which is matching the customer's expectation.
So, of course, this is what we're going to discuss today, is consumer habits, preferences, and the drivers for consumers to buy more sustainable goods. And Youssef, I have to ask you here, are there certain elements of sustainability that consumers usually focus on? I don't know, is it more about sustainable packing? Is it more about waste reduction? I mean, what kind of sustainable factors and criteria do consumers focus on?
So I think if we go back to COVID days, it kind of revealed or showed these priorities very clearly, in which, in general, consumers prioritize sustainability when it comes to health-related matters, hygiene, etc. Usually, material sustainability tends to be on the lower priorities, and for understandable reasons. So if you go, for example, sustainability in the food sector, so we see a lot of people wanting to buy organic, wanting to buy locally produced because it relates directly to their health. But if a product doesn't relate directly to their health, for example, bottles or so forth, it becomes a secondary priority, let's say. So I would say priority is where sustainability and health-related matters. And we wish to see the same, as also my colleagues here said, that we need to think the same, not only about ourselves, our bodies, and our health, but also the health of the planet. When we connect with that, then we would be able, as consumers, to care about our effect with throwing a bottle or throwing a piece of garment in the landfill. We will take it more seriously.
And I want to come to you, Maryam, with this. With your experience as the founder and the president of Rebound Plastics, what is most important to, or what should be most important to consumers when it comes to sustainability and buying and consuming only environment-friendly products?
We first need to understand what is the definition of environmental friendly. Maybe me choosing to carpool with my friends is environmentally friendly versus me having to buy a Tesla in other people's viewpoints is environmentally friendly. So that's maybe one way to predefine my answer. Consumers need to think if they want something or if they need it. You know, the more we live our day throughout the day, for an example, today in the morning, instead of me having coffee at home, if I buy coffee from outside, I'm using reusable or let's say single-use packaging. And then I put up and I want to go to a meeting where I need to take notes. Do I bring my own tablet to take notes, or do I use a paper pad and pen and then just scribble and take that and then create paper waste? And. This type of awareness needs to be ingrained in consumers when they want to be sustainable. Me buying a piece of item or picking up something because it has a brown color or because it's wrapped in a green leaf.
Because it looks
because it looks more environmentally friendly doesn't mean that it is. So questioning yourself, do I need to buy 5 tomatoes or can I just stick with 2 and leave the other 3? People are not used to this type of consumer behavior because marketing pushes us to feel like we need everything we see. So even with textiles, recently when I came to know that textile recycling is not necessarily as advanced as it should be, I don't buy more clothes if I don't need them, because what will I do with them after? No one can recycle them at the moment. And just that shift of mindset, what is sustainability, what is environmental friendly, and how can I make sure that everything I consume, when it reaches its end life, can I give it a second life? Or can I give it to the proper company that will take care of it and not throw it in the ocean?
And that goes back to the first question we asked Florence about pre-loved items and their contribution to a more sustainable planet. So Florence, does marketing, because coming from Chalhoub Group, I know that you do a lot of marketing campaigns about pre-loved goods. When you market these type of goods, to what extent does sustainability is a key factor you include in the marketing material? To what extent do you think that it's actually causing a shift in consumer behavior toward a more sustainable strategy of purchasing items?
I mean, we always give the choice, to the customers. And I think to accompany the shift of behavior, we need to give the choice of, what is now on the market and what they could be also purchasing. But we know also that, if you want to develop the e-commerce, we have to solve many obstacles still for the customers. And there are big obstacles like authentication, like if you want to push the re-commerce pre-loved purchase of a pre-loved handbag, how can I make sure that this product is a real one? You know, so companies and platforms will have to invest into authentication technologies. You know? So that's something we need to look at. Condition of the products. If we want to sell a pre-loved handbag, we need to make sure that the customers has access to accurate description, accurate picture, that maybe the product has gone through a refurbishment service or a repair service. You know? And at the end of the day, that the customer received the products he thought he would buy. Third, which is the most difficult, I would say, to solve, and it's the emotional stigma. And we know that still in the GCC compared to Europe or the States, this can be uncomfortable to buy a pre-loved item. So you have people who are really used to it, to buy, again, placing it in the concept of luxury, buying a product because it's a vintage product, because it's a limited edition product. But from a marketing perspective, and to your point, we also need to shift the narrative, you know, and to make the customer understand what's the beauty of this product. And last but not least, it's also the trust on the platform, you know, because most of these products are bought online, still in the GCC. So how can the platform make sure that the customer has got access to customer reviews, that there's very strong return or exchange policies for the customer? So yes, there is a way to increase the e-commerce, but as you were saying, we need to influx all this control system and reassurance to the customer to push the narrative further.
So Youssef, I want to get back to you with what Maryam is saying. For one, when I go to the supermarket and I find something that is either brown or green, in my mind, this is environment friendly. This is sustainable product just because of the color. I don't even read the ingredients or the packing details. And I know that you have great experience with recycling. So for us consumers, when I hold a product, are there certain materials that I should be paying attention to that are not really sustainable? I know for one is plastic, because it needs, I think, 100 years to actually degrade. But are there other factors and other components that we as consumers must be mindful of when it comes to sustainable products?
Definitely, a lot of the products around the world, not only here, are marketed as sustainable, but they're not. They just put a stamp that looks nice, and sadly, it's not very easy to control. What I would suggest as a summary is to Google, and Google is our best friend, something called greenwashing, and specifically something called the 7 sins of greenwashing. It's an American standard of identifying these kind of misleading greenwashing tactics by different companies. And a lot of them speak about how to identify easily whether this label is authenticated or not, whether when they claim that this is made from recycled material, is it true or not. So because the panel will not be enough time to explain a lot of these things, but one small thing, if you don't see a clear reference to which standard do they claim to abide with, then in most cases, if not all cases, that it is just a pure lie and it's misleading. So there needs to always be a reference to a standard. If it's organic, there needs to be a reference. If it's compostable as a packaging, there needs to be a reference to what standard it's compostable. So labels, always labels need to be accompanied by a reference. In terms of what material is more recyclable, more environmental, this also goes back to identifying whether these labels of recycling actually specify the type of plastics. We cannot get rid of plastics. We still need it for many different products, for food, beverages that are perishable in some cases. But whenever you see a plastic label that doesn't have a clear plastic numbering, in most cases it is non-recyclable plastic. They just put this nice triangle, and it's not really recyclable. But really, the best way is to go and Google something called the 7 sins of greenwashing. Yeah.
Please, Florence and Maryam, I would like also to hear your thoughts.
I could interact. And that's where regulations also can help, because when you see in other markets like Europe, now the products will have to have the green passport, and the label, and the traceability is extremely important. And this can be also driven by legislation in some cases, because for me it's a balance between the customer making an effort to do the research and the awareness, etc. But also it has to be guided in some way by legislation to make it accessible for customers, to ease their journey into finding if the product is sustainable or not. So not too much regulation, but in some areas it can help.
Yes, Maryam, please.
I mean, there's no right or wrong way of the material being great, because today, if you take tea for an example, tea is mainly probably wrapped in paper, and then there's a plastic lining inside, and then either it's tea bags or it's loose leaves, and that still comes in its own different packaging, and then there's a stapler. So there are so many materials, which Youssef, what he meant by saying the panel won't be enough, because even as recyclers, when they get the material, if there's a sticker, if there's multi-layers, if there's other types of accompanied nice to have things there, it's going to get more difficult. But from a consumer perspective, I think just customers need to educate themselves. If you don't need a tissue paper, don't take it. You can drink out of a glass. You don't need a straw. You don't need a lid for your hot coffee. Certain things that people can start realizing, taking out, and then just trying to start their sustainable journey.
Florence, I want to get back to you with what you were mentioning about e-commerce and what does it mean for the sustainability topic. When you look at e-commerce and the ease it is today to buy something, to order something, do you think that this is something that is positive or negative when it comes to climate change and fighting climate change and achieving sustainability?
Now we need to find a balance, because now e-commerce, you can buy something and have it in 1 hour. How is it sustainable? How is it good for the environment? So it's a balance between answering customer needs but also doing the right thing for the environment. So for us, for example, when it comes to e-commerce, we made sure to again give the option in terms of packaging. If I just take the packaging or the delivery time, give the option to choose a delivery time which is, let's say, 1 week, if you really need the item now, or take the green option to have it in 1 week. Same for the packaging, especially in luxury. We were talking about it. You want the items in a very beautiful box, because most of the time you want to gift it. So this we completely understand. Now, if you buy the product for yourself, do you need 2 or 3 boxes, like luxury boxes? Maybe you need only 1, and the rest can be a brown paper bag. So
it's kind of personal decisions that you have to make your purchase or order sustainable.
Exactly, but as a retailer, we also have a huge responsibility. You need to give the choice to the customer, because at the end of the day, there's what the customer wants, and there's also what's good for the planet and what is environmental friendly. But we need to give the customer the option, and this is also part of the education, I would say, and this which will help the customer behavior shift we are talking about. And when I was giving these numbers at the beginning of the panel on the e-commerce market planning to grow 10 to 15% year on year by 2026, it cannot be done without a customer shift. But the customer shift will be, as Maryam was saying, it has to come from the customer, but it has also to come from the distributors and from the retailers and from the brands.
So the change has to start all the way from the top, from the company itself and its suppliers. And Youssef, when I look at the economic environment following the years of COVID, we had high interest rates, we had an inflationary environment, we have supply chain issues. So for many companies, retailers around the globe, sustainability was not really a priority. They were focusing on this, protecting their profit margins, making sure they achieve the revenue and sales for their investors. So today, do you think that companies, I'm talking here globally, do you think that they're doing enough to actually do their part when it comes to ESG, when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to protecting the planet? Are they doing enough?
I believe all of us should do more. So there's a lot of emphasis on companies specifically, but it's like we need to look at all the stakeholders, from the consumer to the companies to the producers to the legislators, etc. If we are doing enough, we wouldn't be talking about a crisis of the 2050 target to cut global warming. So definitely we are not doing enough, but things are going in the right direction. So with especially, as you've seen, at least in our region, and more specifically the UAE and Saudi Arabia are pushing a lot of green agendas, are getting people to meet, to align with all these events that have been happening here. And on a global scale, and we've noticed it here even, the ESG standards that are starting to come to the market are slowly forcing big companies to embed social and environmental practices in a way that is connected to their financials. Because if you go 5-10 years ago, yes, companies will only look at how much profit they make at the end of the year. Their accounting, their annual reports, etc., mostly focused on that. But with the shift of the ESG mentality, it's embedding environmental and social numbers in annual reporting. And it is also affecting how these companies can get funding from the big banks, because even the biggest companies and brands still depend to a high extent on loans from banks to work. And yes, banks started asking for ESG reports, for proof of these things. So it's going in the right direction, but I believe everyone needs to do more to be able to catch up with climate change. Yeah.
So I have a question to you, Maryam and Florence. Is sustainability and ESG criteria costly for companies? And I want to start with you, Maryam. To what extent do you think that actually it costs a lot of money for companies to be sustainable?
So again, in the reverse or in the recycling value chain, companies are different. So you have the multinationals, which are doing their bit in the R&D, okay? And then you have the consumers that are disposing the waste. But then one thing that people are not addressing are the waste companies. So today, if me as Maryam, I separate my plastics, I put my clothes differently, my other materials, I dump it in a bin. Where does that bin go? And how can a company retrieve, whether it's Youssef's company or someone else, how can these recyclers retrieve the materials, recycle them, and then give them back to the company that is using it? So, yes, it's a bit more expensive at the start, but when supply meets demand, everything is at equilibrium. And finance officers, as much as they don't like this, they're also starting to accept it, because finance officers have families, and thankfully many of them are being pressured by their children. So people need to wake up that ESG and sustainability is not a buzzword unless they want to wake up tomorrow to a pile of trash outside their house. And so, as Youssef said, all of us can do more. I, for one, do think that some companies are doing a lot more than others, but it's these middle value chain players that have to really put in the correct infrastructure and admit that they can tweak their P&Ls a bit just to make the environment a bit more cleaner.
So just before I hear from you, Florence, your thoughts on that, I just want to highlight that the reason why we are asking this question is that some companies sell the narrative that we can create sustainable products, but it's going to be sold at a higher price. Someone needs to pay for the extra cost, and it's not going to be only us. We have to share it with the consumer. And that's why we're asking today, to what extent is being sustainable costly for companies? And Florence, please let me know your thoughts.
So coming from the perspective of retailers and distributors, so we don't actually produce products, but for me, it's all a question of a timeline. Like, of course, there will be an investment, then you need to calculate your return on investment, which probably won't be short-term, it will be medium to long-term. But all the projects we've put in place, like energy efficiency, looking at upgrading all our system in our head office, in our warehouses, we've been seeing a decrease of 20% of our energy consumption. You speak about mobility. We've invested about in optimization, routes optimization software, which we saw a decrease of 25% of petrol consumption. You know, like printers, you know, we shifted to smart printers where we saw year on year a decrease of 30 and 50% consumption of paper. So you name it. So there is a business sense for investing in sustainability. The thing is that, again, if you expect a very quick return, probably it won't happen, but it's in the timeline, it will happen. Then, as you were saying, we have obviously our chief financial officers who are there also to make sure it makes a business case and why sense. And why have we done it? Because it does make a sense for business.
So I still have 5 minutes to wrap up our session today, and I have a question for all three of you. We are all here consumers. At the end of the day, we go, we shop, we do online shopping as well. So what message would you like to leave with us when it comes to playing our role in protecting our planet, in participating in the decarbonization process, and in building a more sustainable future? What message would you like to give us? Let me start with you, Youssef, first.
This is a very big question because there's a lot we can say. But in summary, just think of what you would do for your children and think of the environment not as an external thing, but as an inclusive or internal thing, the same way we think about our health. I remember very well when I had my newborn, we automatically switched from eating anything that we see in front of us into eating healthy, eating organic, etc. So I think we need to think over generations, and as my colleagues said earlier also, I think the next generation will push us anyway because they are more educated. The young generation are pushing their families, their parents. As a recycling company, we get calls from 5-year-olds sometimes saying, I want to recycle my bottles, and then their parents would come shouting, who are you talking to? And I don't know what. And so I think we need to think and long term also as consumers about what we want to keep for our kids.
That's lovely. Florence, please.
For me, a quick action as a customer, be extremely demanding, like challenge us, challenge the brand. Like, don't take anything for granted. I mean, I'll give you a very quick example. We had, speaking of e-commerce, we had some feedback from customers, saying they were too much bubble wrap against, around the product. Immediately, we shifted to craft paper. And so because it was a customer voicing out their concern, which we followed, we shifted, we found a more sustainable solution, making the customer happy, making also business sense and sustainable options. So please you are also a citizen of the world, and we need to be challenged, like as companies, as brands, and any feedback, any voice out which is constructive will ultimately help us in the journey.
I think as consumers, try to repurpose everything as much as we can. Try to plan your routes of the day to, not drive as much if you don't need to. Try to repurpose your food into muffins. Try to repurpose your waste into a reusable thing. Just be very conscious. It's very difficult at the start, but once you start, it becomes a habit, and then habits die hard. So it becomes easier for you to influence those around you as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank our audience. This is the last panel of today. And I would like just to end it. I've been here for the last couple of days, and I moderated many panels. I've heard from many speakers. I heard from you outside, the audience, your feedback. And one thing I think the main message of the summit this year is that we cannot put the whole responsibility on one party and say it's their responsibility, they have to do their role. It's not only government responsibility, it's not corporates and multinationals' responsibility. It starts really small. It starts with us, because all of us live on this planet. Our kids will live on this planet as well, at least because Elon Musk didn't find a way yet to inhabit Mars. So let's protect this planet, and I hope to see you all next year. Thank you so much for joining us.